And they were fiddling with the stories so that no one was rude to them, you know, because they were worried about the Israeli lobby, obviously.
It goes further than that. I mean, you know, you mentioned in the book as well about the fact that Michael Moore in Fahrenheit 9/11 doesn't mention Israel once.
That's
You'd
right.
expect him to.
In Syriana, there is no mention of Israel. Syriana is all about Arabs, and not once, all Arab, especially Arab leaders. They all mention Israel. They talk about it constantly, but not in the film. You know, the best film which pushed the envelope of trying to understand the nature of Israeli power was Munich, Spielberg's film. As usual, Muslims condemned the film without seeing it, just as Muslims condemned Kingdom of Heaven, the Crusader movie, with Orlando Bloom, which I thought was very good.
I love the story that you have in the book about that, where you talk about watching it with a Muslim audience and how impassioned they were and how excited.
Well, every time Salah ad-Din committed a generous act towards the Christians and the Europeans, they stood up and went, "Wah, wah, wah, wah," they clapped him. You know, this was the heart of West Beirut. I mean, when there's a scene in the film where the Crusaders are drawing their swords and hacking off Muslim heads, and then they go to rape and murder Saladin's sister, a beautiful woman in a chador. And at the beginning, I was sitting in the cinema sort of going, this way and this way, you know, what are they going to do and react? And the audience just knew it happened, and they watched it. They watched the portrayal, which was very grim and graphic. At one point, after the Battle of Hattin, 1187, Saladin orders the execution of the wounded. You see this pile of heads. It reminds you of Iraq, of course. I think it's meant to remind you of Iraq. All that was missing was the videotape, you know. But it's a film that was very fair. And Munich, you see, actually suggested that the idea of constant warfare and turning your enemies into terrorists, or in your mind, was never going to work. It was an unending war. It ends with a situation where one of the top Mossad agents is going around Manhattan in fear of his life of being killed by Mossad. He actually storms into the defense attaché's office at the Israeli consulate in New York. A stunning bit of film. We've never seen anything like this. And what did the Muslims do? They didn't see it. They just complained it was pro-Israeli. Ridiculous. And Spielberg, who got attacked by many Israeli supporters, he made a brilliant film. It was a magnificent film, Munich. You know, everyone should watch it. Having said that, I should add one thing. I keep referring to Israeli supporters. The amazing thing is that Israelis themselves never behave like the supporters, the lobbyists do. You know, I get letters from Israel. Of course I do. Some of them even say, keep it up. Lefties, of course. You know. But even when they take issue, or they disagree with something, or say it's factually inaccurate, and they don't actually get it right because they're not in Lebanon, they don't understand it, they're polite. And I write back to them, of course, politely. And once or twice I've actually met them when I've gone to Israel. We've phoned each other and had lunch, and I've tried to explain the situation. But Israelis are very straightforward because they live there, you see. They live in Israel. They know the risks and they know what's happening.
Just going on to Iraq a little bit, what's your opinion of the journalists being embedded with the military?
Look, the mere fact that we accept the word embedded, which was produced by the military, tells its own story. I mean, we used to call them pools in the 1991 war. Now we call them embedded. I mean, I won't say it's the end of journalism, but when I actually heard my colleagues saying, well, I'm being embedded with the 31st whatever, or the 101 whatever, I thought, well, that's it. That's the end, isn't it? I mean, I think to travel with armies, with Western armies, can produce enormously good journalism. I'm not against the idea that journalists should be with armies. I'd rather they didn't use the word embedded, but that's a different matter. I would feel most uncomfortable doing so, and I've never done so, and I basically, I'm the correspondent who has to report the Arab side, so I tend to be in Stalingrads with defeated armies all the time. That's my fate in the Middle East. Palestine is defeated, Iraq is defeated, Syria is defeated. So I was in Baghdad, and I was watching the reports, of course, there from the embedded reporters, and comparing them with the reality that I saw.
And how far differently were they?
They were in a different world. You know, before the Iraq War began, I was actually, because I was still giving lectures in the United States every few weeks or a few days, I was going between Baghdad, Washington, Beirut, New York, Beirut, Baghdad. And it was like living on two planets, you know. I mean, the Iraqis were just as in fantasy world as George Bush and the United Nations was. You know, Saddam had no belief at all they were going to invade. And Iraqis say, they will never come, we shall drive them back into the sea, we shall turn the desert into the crematorium and so on. I said, you won't, mate. You won't.
That great guy who was still kind of...
Yeah, well, I said, you know, the American army is the most powerful military machine. It's not so powerful now, but that's a different matter. And I go over to, you know, New York and be talking to delegates to the United Nations General Assembly. I said, you're going to bring democracy to Iraq? Are you out of your mind? You know, I think, Mr. Fisk, you don't understand. There's a new kind of world out there. There's a new kind of future. We've got to move on. We've got to forget the past, blah, 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 blah. And I waited in Baghdad, and the Americans came, and the world fell in.
But they didn't want to bring democracy. They wanted to bring their democracy.
No, they didn't want to bring democracy at all. At the beginning, see, here again, we've rewritten the narrative. We did not go to Iraq for democracy. Paul Bremer wanted native councils to assist the Americans in setting up their administration. It was only when Sistani, the most prominent Shiite religious leader, told Bremer, if you don't have elections, which of course the Shiites were bound to win, as they did, we will join the Sunnis in their insurgency, that Bremer said, okay, let's have a democracy. That's when it came in. Originally, there was no talk of democracy at all. We talked about freedom and liberation, but that's not the same thing. Oh, we talked about human rights, but we're always offering people human rights from our supermarket shelves. That's par for the course. No, we did not look for that. And we went there for oil. Of course we went there for oil. You know, people say, you're not paying attention to the neocon reality. You may not like it, Bob. It's right-wing, but come on, they were going there. Saddam was a wicked man. He gassed his own people, but the fact that he gassed his own people when America was supporting him is not the point. And I said, no, it's not going to work. These people want freedom from you. That's the freedom they want. You know, I've calculated for our Sunday magazine that, you know, there are now 22 times more military forces, personnel, in the Muslim world than there were Crusaders in the 12th century. Why are we there? Well, we are there because of oil. If the national product of Iraq was asparagus, I don't think the 82nd Airborne
and it seems that
Mosul would it?
No, it wouldn't. And it seems that we're getting that oil. I mean, the new policies
the new laws that are going through are going to allow primarily American oil companies to control all future reserves until further notice in Iraq. And you've got to realize
how does that get through? How does that get through? Because surely there must be some Iraqis who have to be on that side. Do they not understand it? Do they
Mr. al-Maliki depends on the United States to survive. His government cannot exist without the United States. So they stamp it through. It'll go. I mean, eventually, when the Americans leave, or are forced to leave, it's going to be the end of the Maliki government, and whoever takes power will then annul all the laws.
And that's the difference, though, isn't it? It's the Maliki government that needs the Americans, not Iraq. Because that's
personally, I think if al-Maliki had said, we totally refuse to pass this law, get out of our country, he'd remain Prime Minister for quite a long time. But he's not going to. He's not going to do that.
The argument I hear from Fred, I had a huge argument with a friend the other night about this, knowing that I was going to interview, and he was saying America has to stay there. If they left, there would be a power vacuum, and everybody would be killed.
Oh, sure. Look, when the British were on the streets of Belfast, and it all turned wrong in 1969, 1970, the line from the British government is, our troops may be hated by certain sections of the terrorist community, but if they leave, there will be civil war. Every time, the French said the same. If we leave Algeria, there'll be civil war. There was enough killing going on anyway. 1.5 million Algerians died in the 54-62 war against the French. Always we say this. The same in Afghanistan. If we leave Afghanistan now, the Taliban will be back, the women will be oppressed. Most women still wear the burqa, but we all know that. It's always the same excuse. Look, historically, under national interests, we do leave countries when we feel we have to. We left India. We knew when we partitioned India into Pakistan and India, with the huge communities of Hindus in what was going to be Pakistan and Muslims in India, we knew there would be chaos, anarchy, and civil war. And there was. And our soldiers remained in barracks and watched people being slaughtered by the thousand. I actually met a British soldier who remembered going down a river in Calcutta in his military boat and looking up and seeing all these women and children and men lying across a bridge as someone came along and hacked off all their heads, and the heads were falling into the water, and they did nothing. We knew when we left Palestine in 1948 that there was going to be a civil war between Arab and Jew, and there was, and we left. Now, all I'm saying is, we will leave and we won't care about the Iraqis. We don't care about the Iraqis. I've just been in a lecture at the University of Auckland and said, well, anyone here can name of the 250,000, 360,000, 500,000, 1 million Iraqis who died, can anyone here name one of them? There wasn't a single hand went in the air. I mean, we know the name of every American soldier. The New York Times prints how many have died, where he comes from, is he married, what unit was he in, how old was he? But we don't care about Muslims. We don't care about Arabs. We don't care about the Iraqis. We didn't care if they had a democracy or not. We didn't really want it.